got a huge stack of books. I would love to share with you what I thought about them, hoping to keep this nice and concise. I finished, the thing that really got me back from a slump was a middle grade book. That's always a good thing to try when you're not having a good time. It's just a nice story where the way that it's written just pulls you back. This is The Trouble with Heroes. This is the new book by Kate Messner, who's one of my favorite middle grade authors. So yes, Northeast, climbing mountains. He's going through a hard time. He lost his father. Not very clear at the start of it, but you kind of get a sense that something happened related to 9/11, but like 20 years after the fact, so you start thinking in your head PTSD or like being sick from what happened there, etc., etc. And him, the main character, trying to deal with his grief. The main character is kind of a brat and kind of insufferable, and he's not like a goody two-shoes whatsoever. He doesn't really think that he should care about what he's doing that's affecting other people and hurting other people's feelings. Then he kind of grows from that and you start to see him develop. It's just really lovely to see it from his point of view. There's also lots of baking in here as well, and making friends with older folks as he's climbing these mountains. He's going with people that are connected to his father in some way, and to try to repay the bad deed that kicks off this story as well. So it's really nice found family vibes, and I think I settled on 4 stars. The next book that I read that also pulled me out of a slump, another thing that will pull you out of a slump, is a nice graphic novel, graphic nonfiction. And this one was a graphic nonfiction book from the author illustrator thinking back at his time with his girlfriend who he lost to cancer, and how she's seen the world and how grief comes to him in waves. And that's kind of the main point of this story. He also uses the history of surfing in general, like who came up with it and where it came from indigenous folks. It was interesting to learn that history, but definitely I think that detracted from the main emotional story, and don't feel like we knew enough about the main couple to really feel those emotions along with him. It's probably just like something that was really helpful to him along his journey, but I wish could have been narratively a little bit stronger, and I think I ended up giving this like 3 or 3.5 stars. I did really enjoy the coloring. The coloring is really beautiful, and the style I like as well. Then I read a book that I don't have, which is Sunrise on the Reaping, the very, very anticipated new release from Suzanne Collins, the Hunger Games series. And this is again another one that looks back, so it goes back and tells kind of like a prequel in a way, and follows Haymitch's story as how Haymitch got picked to go into the games and what his experience was like. I never ended up reading the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes because I didn't really feel interested in President Snow's story, but I do really love learning about Haymitch, even though he is his own like problematic character who has struggles and, you know, has drinking problems, etc. But this shows you how he got to be that way. I just closed this book and honestly thought to myself, like, poor guy, like he's been through quite a lot. This is definitely one of those books that, just like the Hunger Games, there are so many parts of it that really hurt to read, that characters are lost along the way that you're rooting for or caring for. So definitely be in anticipation that it's probably going to make you feel sad, and because of why does it have to be this way basically, but it's the life that these kids have to deal with. It's sad, it's inspiring, it's rebellious, it's exhilarating, it's all the things that the original Hunger Games books were. I think I definitely still care more about Katniss's story, but I think Haymitch does have quite the story to tell as well, so I was glad to read this too. And I ended up giving it 4 stars. This book, Good Material by Dolly Alderton, and this has been on my list for a bit. It had a lot of buzz last year, and it ended up being picked for a book club that I was a part of. It took me a while to like actually dive in and read it, and I ended up listening to most of it. The audiobook is very good. I didn't really know what this was until I started reading it. I did not from the cover and from like the author's name and just like the general things that I've seen online about this book. I didn't know it was a male main character, and so that took me by surprise. But he is very self-deprecating. He's very funny about himself and his shortfalls, and I think that he is an interesting character to follow. I did really enjoy following him and trying to see how he was going to get over this breakup that he has with his girlfriend that he thought like was going to be end game for him and he was going to marry and have children with, and it didn't work out that way. And so he's like pining for her and venting to his friends, and it's a lot about how you get into your 30s and like you lose your friend groups because everybody's doing their own thing with their own families, nuclear families, and kind of forgetting the friendships of your 20s. He's struggling with that. He's also struggling with his job. He's a comedian, and he isn't booking very many jobs, and people don't think that he's actually that funny. Ultimately, like, very soft and sweet. Everybody is very caring for each other and supportive of each other, even though they're all going through troubles. And I think what really like set this apart is the end, where it flips. There's like a flip in how the point of view is told, and you get to learn more about why the breakup happened and what the perspective of his girlfriend that is now, they're now broken up, what her perspective is about the whole relationship. So that really like turned it in a way. So I would come to this book if you like sad books, but sad books that have really good characters that you want to follow. And I think it just shows you and tells you that, like, while you have insight on who other people are, your innermost thoughts are still your innermost thoughts unless you share them with others to make them understand why you feel the way that you feel. Sometimes that does not come through in the communication that couples have with each other, and that's the case for our main character here. I think this book gave me feelings for characters that I haven't been able to find in Emily Henry books, while providing that humor that I like in Emily Henry books, and like a love story that isn't like always going to be a happy ending, but it's just more looking into relationships. I finished Die Hot with a Vengeance, Essays on Vanity by Sable Yong. It's very readable, it's very chatty, it's light, it's easy to follow it. There's just nothing really like wrong with it. It just wasn't super meaningful or significant in all of the things that I read on these topics. So their topics discuss like hair, injectables, shaving, being seen as pretty by society, what clean beauty is, self-care and how we view it. And so it kind of just like meandered through many topics. She's very vulnerable, shares her own experiences. She's very honest and candid and realistic. I think she's pretty smart. I think that she makes good points. There wasn't really enough research or like context and background in this to like super deliver her main point of view. So I don't think that this should be called Essays on Vanity. I think this should be called Memoir in Essays. Die Hot with Vengeance, Memoir in Essays, because it's really not Essays on Vanity. It's Essays on Vanity relating specifically to the author. 3 stars for that one. Then I read a book that I didn't have a lot of expectations for and ended up really enjoying it, and that is You Didn't Hear This From Me. Mostly True Notes on Gossip by Kelsey McKinney. This is written by a podcaster. I've read quite a few books by podcasters where I don't listen to the podcast, but I'm interested in the topics that their books are about. I read this one. It's about gossip, as you can imagine, and she focuses on lots of different tidbits from her life and talks about why gossip is important to us as human beings and what it does for us in our society and in our like social connections with the relationships that we have in our lives. She talks about Mean Girls, she talks about Britney Spears, she talks about reality TV gossip, in particular the Scandival stuff that happened in Bravo Land, which I'm not really a part of, but I know about. Urban legends too. She had a whole essay on urban legends and myths and where they come from and what they're trying to teach us. She talks about like religion and religious communities in here and how they describe gossip, like you shouldn't be gossiping, how our brains hear and interpret gossip that might be wrong, which is something that's happened to me. I learned a lot reading this. It was still like light. It did basically what I wanted the previous book, Sable Young's book, to do, but it did have a little bit of context and background so that the memoir essay parts, it's not just memoir, there is like a little bit more hunk meat to it than just like this is my experience. So I did enjoy that it leaned a little bit more on research and cultural criticism and analysis than the previous book that I talked about. Really enjoyed her thoughts on Britney Spears, in particular with a book that I'm going to talk about later in comparison to that. I ended up giving this book a very straightforward 4 stars. Good book. Then I read a book that I was really anticipating this year and finally got a hold for it and listened to it on audiobook as well. This is American Bulk, Essays on Excess. I was kind of on an essay kick, as you can see, by Emily Mester. Everything that I've heard about this book really intrigued me. I've been reading a lot of books lately about consumerism, how many things we own in our households, and basically looking at all the things that you have in your household to really only keep the things that you need. And so the author of Mester is looking into how we buy, eat, amass, and discard, and how that is a really big part of American culture. She definitely takes like a cultural critique analysis, like intellectual look at it, but I was very, very surprised by how vulnerable she was in sharing very openly the things that are going on in her own family dynamics, the way she describes her father in contrast to her grandmother, something that I feel like if I was a writer I wouldn't do. And so I appreciated that she was so like open book about the ways that this topic has fractured a lot of her family. Her father is one of those people that sees owning things as a metric of success and something that makes him feel good about himself. You know, like one of those people that you can't buy birthday gifts for because they have already bought themselves the things that they already want, which I know people like that in my life. And that is in sharp contrast to her grandmother, who is more like a frugal hoarder that basically will take things from hotel rooms, like little soap bottles or shampoo bottles, and collect like toilet paper from hotel rooms and just like keep all of these things thinking that you're going to use it at some point, even though really it's just like taking up space and it's kind of trash. So there's lots of different essays in here. One's about Costco. She has a whole essay on reviews, which also makes me like reviewing this book feel kind of weird. She has a whole essay on Olive Garden. She also worked at Ulta and also is insightful to her how she views consumerism. So overall I think this was worthy of my time and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Definitely this had really good, similar to the gossip book where it mixes like the cultural critique and analysis with the memoir. And then I was really on a roll and getting through books and having a good time and started to incorporate graphic novels, which is something that I really haven't been reading a lot of this year. So first I read The Ribbon Skirt by Cameron Mukwa, and very shortly thereafter I read Timid by Jonathan Todd. And The Ribbon Skirt was a lot less successful for me than Timid was, though both of these didn't really deliver the kinds of things that I look for in graphic novels these days. They were just a little bit more surface level and I just wanted like a little bit more emotion out of these for me personally. So The Ribbon Skirt is kind of like a fantastical book and looks into a main character who wants to dance with a ribbon skirt but is kind of being told, put in a box, you can't do that because you're X, Y, and Z, you don't fit the parameters of what we expect ribbon skirt girls to look like or be like. It really introduces the concept of two-spirit or non-binary in Native American communities. Yeah, there's just not very much text and development, and they're kind of like on a journey to try to find the materials to make the ribbon skirt. I gave this 2 stars. I just wanted it to be, the writing to be a little bit stronger, the plot to be a little bit stronger. It just felt like an idea that could have been maybe even a picture book than a graphic novel for me. Timid I did enjoy. I did think that it met like a lot of the things that are very typical for graphic novels for children, which is a main character who is shy but loves to draw, loves to make comics. And so that is definitely like what this main character is. It is kind of autobiographical, so it follows the author as he's growing up in this town, and then they end up moving to a town that is a lot whiter, and so there's a lot of discussion of being like an Oreo. He like wants to really get into art, and so he starts like joining contests, and the people that he meets at school, he like starts to make t-shirts and stuff that are, you know, showing off his artistic ability. Not very much happens. He has like a crush on a girl and he has like conflict with his father, who does not believe that he can be an artist. The art style I think is what maybe would push people away. It reminded me of like newspaper cartoons, just like that style. It just, that's what it reminded me of, and the character work too. Like they don't really look like children to me. Yeah, I like the coloring. I didn't really mind the art. It's just something to take into consideration. It's not like that cutesy Raina Telgemeier style for me. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. So then after that I read a book that I don't have, There Is No Place for Us Working and Homeless in America by Brian Goldstone. This is like the star book of this video. This is the only book that I rated 5 stars out of all of these. I really valued my time with this book. It's exactly what I look for in narrative nonfiction, so this is definitely like a read-alike to Evicted by Matthew Desmond. It's a read-alike for This Is All I Got by Lauren Sandler, which is a book that I read a few years ago that I really loved, and Invisible Child by Andrea Elliott also. There's No Place for Us kind of gave me a new place of the country to look at this issue through, and it's focusing on families in Atlanta, in Georgia, and follows 5 different families, I believe, and the time period that it follows them is like right before COVID into like a few years into COVID. I think the way that the author goes about it, like the way that he comes at this from his background, he is an anthropologist, and he is also a journalist, and the things that he focuses on, I think that they do come from that like anthropology, like watching people, how they do what they do, like how they live, which reminded me a lot of Evicted. It's definitely like seeing first person like what's happening. The stories are definitely super heartbreaking. All of these families go through struggles where they do lose housing. Some of them are on the street, some of them are living out of cars, some of them are living in shelters, and some of them just basically like take a stumble and end up in a place where you don't want to be living, like extended stay hotels and motels. That's like an area that I haven't read enough about. Never really knew about extended stays and like the predatory behavior that they operate under, because they know that they can take advantage of people because they are at their wits' end. So like there's no upkeep whatsoever, but they also don't have any renters' rights because they don't rent. They're in a hotel. I think this book really shows you how in today's economy, even if you're doing all the things, it's so easy to like fall prey to these situations. All of the things that were upended because of COVID and education also affected a lot of the families in this book. Also, another thing to look at is that 4 of the families here are single moms who sometimes may have other help, but mostly it's like them on their own, and the way that relationships fracture over time because they've basically asked everybody for help, and how that frays those relationships. There is one couple in here, a married couple that you follow as well, which, you know, gives you that other perspective of like, if you had done everything right and you like married before you had children and you did XYZ, you had all these, you know, jobs, stable jobs before you did all these things, it can still happen to you, is basically what that story is telling you. And I think the whole general point is that it can happen to anybody. Like, we're all like on that precipice. Everything is so expensive and housing is not a right in this country, and so that is very difficult when things go wrong. It's just interesting to see the South represented as well. It's closer to like my experience growing up than the books that I've mentioned before that are focused in the Midwest or in the Northeast. If you read books about social justice, homelessness in America, poverty, you know, how expensive it is to actually be poor in very much gentrifying cities that are changing. I think I would say the only downside to this book is that, like Evicted, sometimes it was hard to follow whose story we were talking about because there are 5 families, and I would have to like go back to the front page to see like the family tree, and then sometimes too I would just like listen for a couple of minutes and be like, oh yeah, that's who we're talking about, and was able to connect the threads between them. Definitely one that I think you should check out. 5 stars. Another graphic memoir, and that was Visitations by Corey Egbert. This also had like some fantastical elements, kind of like the ribbon skirt. This focused a lot more on religion, and I found that like something that I was not expecting. Some of the things that I got from this cover was even maybe like gender and sexuality. I didn't get Mormonism from the cover here, but that's really what's being looked into in this book. The author went through a really traumatic time in his life, in his like teens, early teens, with his younger sister and mother. His mother believed that their dad was doing things that were wrong to the children. Nothing that was ever proven, and basically at one point the mother took the 2 children in the car and then left, living off of whatever they could find in their car. Him realizing that his mother is suffering from mental illness, trying to figure out if his father is safe, how to ask for help. This book was really going places for me. I really liked how it was discussing all of these very difficult topics, even just talking about like things that boys think in puberty about the opposite sex, if they're attracted to the opposite sex, being wrong in the eyes of his Mormon mother. It's really sad what he went through for sure, and it uses the fantastical element of an angel kind of helping him think through what's happening in his life and decide like, I need help. And then where he is today, what happened to his family. His mother has passed since then. I don't think he clearly knows or sifted through the ways that Mormonism affected his upbringing, and that it wasn't just his mother's mental illness but how she interpreted their religion. Always reading about Mormons and how they interpret their scripture and how that affects how they talk to people, how they develop relationships, like what is a good thought versus a bad thought, and what is a good deed versus a bad deed, and punishment to like how they need to be punished. It's a teen book, but I definitely would recommend it for older teens and adults who are kind of ready for those conversations. I really still feel for him. I feel bad that this happened to him, and I ended up giving that one 3 stars. Let's talk about a book I was really anticipating this year, and that is Waiting for Britney Spears by Jeff Weiss. A true story, allegedly Guess what, everybody? This is not a true story, and it's not alleged. It's for real. This is not a true story. This book is really just Jeff Weiss wanting to be creative about, in a Hunter S. Thompson kind of way, what it was like to live through this era of tabloid journalism, of celebrity culture, and in particular of Britney Spears, and how much we put on her shoulders, how much we watched her like a hawk, how much we criticized her for her mothering, for her decline. Really, this book is about being a paparazzo and like creating contacts, working for magazines, trying to get scoops, trying to get the best picture, doing things that are dangerous to do that, including like driving recklessly, crashing into other people's houses to get good pictures, lying to security guards and like police officers, etc., etc. Are there interesting stories in here? For sure. There are very entertaining stories. I think that comes from the way that Weiss writes this book. It's very captivating. It really wraps you into the story and you feel like swept up into this world, into really feeling like you're there in the 2000s, remembering all of these like random like cultural moments that happened and reliving them through his words. I think was an interesting book. Now, what is the point of this book and why is this book here now? I'm not so sure. I think that's the main criticism of this book, and all the reviews that I've read is like, why is he writing this book now? And why do we care that he's the one that's writing this book now? Why should we take the thoughts of a paparazzi into what happened to Britney Spears? Now knowing what we know was going on with Britney. Is it a cash grab? Perhaps. I don't hate it. I think I gave it 3 stars, and I feel like 3 stars is fair because it's still an interesting piece of semi-real nonfiction. Tidbits are real. So yeah, if you are interested in Britney, sure. But I don't think that this did a better job than the way this book talked about Britney. I thought that this book did a much better job at like realizing what gossip did to Britney in the 2000s. Much better than this full book did. 2 more books to talk about. I finished I Who Have Never Known Men, another book that I ended up giving 3 stars. I gave this book 3 stars because it was very sparse. It wasn't very much what I wanted, which is really focusing on the mystery of the reason why this all happened. So if you haven't heard of this book, which you probably have, it focuses on 40 women who are basically locked in a room and overseen by these men guards. At one point, the men leave and they all like go into the world, but it's just like a vast landscape and there aren't things happening. There isn't like a world. So it's really just a philosophical look at what it is like to be a woman, to be a person, to be curious about the world when you haven't been raised in our world. It's a quick read, so I really enjoyed seeing the character's point of view. I think she was a very interesting main narrator to follow. I just wanted to understand the world a little bit more, and I know that's not the point of this book. It's more open-ended and it's a little bit more vague, and it's about that day-to-day through the years, not really uncovering any new information. That's kind of what I wanted it to like end up being. Maybe a little bit like Severance, where you kind of hear, you're like going through this world that's apocalyptic and different, but you're learning like kind of why it happened and what's going on. And then the last book that I read, I just finished yesterday, and that was Little Bosses Everywhere, How the Pyramid Scheme Shaped America by Bridget Reed. I was super excited about this book. In this book, you're following the history of multi-level marketing in the United States. And so the way that she goes through it is literally from the founding, fake doctors who were like quackers. And then it became kind of like the idea of the plan of basically becoming the head of something and then having a downline who then you make money off of, percentages off of. And so the more that you have in your downline, the higher you are up in the scheme, the more money that you make. That's what I thought this book was going to be about, and that's what it's partially about. But I would say probably 70% of this book is really about the power of multi-level marketing in American society today, from like the 1980s to now. So it's really about how much they have wielded power in making consequential decisions that affect Americans, including women's rights, education, and like private schools and vouchers for school choice, workers' rights, and like how that has affected like the gig economy. The reason why there are no protections for Uber drivers really goes back to multi-level marketing and the independent contractor way that multi-level marketing created all of these people working below them. I really got upset reading this book, in particular learning about Amway, founded by 2 guys, one of them who is related to Betsy DeVos. Just like seeing their power starting in Michigan and then coming into like further presidential politics into the Trump administration in 2016 and into today. I like all of the things that they're tied to, including the Heritage Foundation and lots of other think tanks and groups that affect politics. Project 2025 came from them as well. I got really sad reading this book, knowing that like the people at the top of that company are frauds who don't actually sell soap. They just make money off of the people that are below them that don't make as much as them and become in debt underneath them. And they were just lucky because they were the first and then it caught on. And so that's really upsetting. It's pretty upsetting. The things about this book, sometimes it's a little bit dry. Sometimes it's a little bit procedural. There were moments where I was like, okay, get on with it. I think sometimes too, I got mad reading this book. She got mad writing this book, and so a lot of her emotions on what's happening definitely come through. She definitely shows her cards, which sometimes it's like understandable, but sometimes it's more like she has like this idea that she really wants to lay it out to you, and I can see how that could bother some people. I also just wish that this had more personal stories about people who have been affected by MLMs who are downline all the way to the bottom. So there's one person that they really focus on in this book. Her name is Monique, and she was like an ex-vet that after leaving the military didn't really want to work for others, so she was like, I'll work for myself, and she got into Mary Kay. How she lost basically $75,000 to Mary Kay over the span of like 10 years. How it affects regular Americans who are not at the top of the pyramid. There's interesting chapters on like Herbalife, Nutrilite, Amway, like I said, Mary Kay. Avon's not like technically an MLM in bits, but they do talk about it. There were new ones to me like Paparazzi. They like sell jewelry, like really ugly looking jewelry. So that's a new one to keep an eye out. It didn't mention one that like I saw a lot growing up, which was Monet, which is like a hair shampoo thing. I definitely do recommend if this is like a topic that interests you. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I've really been picking up my reading in the last month, I would say, and I've been having a good time again. Something about like the start of summer, there's just a lot going on. I've also been doing a lot more exercising, and I typically film morning when I work my night every week, and I haven't been able to do that because I've been going to a morning workout class that morning. So that's like kind of been taken away, and then I just haven't found a good weekend time to record. I hope that you enjoyed watching this video, and hopefully I'll see you in a video soon. See you later. Bye.